Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Kathy. There's actually going to be two of us presenting today. I'm going to ask a counterpart to join me in a few moments. Forgive me as I pull my notes up. So my first time presenting, so forgive me. Oh, sorry. You have the slide? Dad, are your slides? TC, the slides? Okay. Oh, perfect. How do I click?
Keyboard goes forward.
Sorry, y'all.
Backwards. Forward.
Perfect. Oh. Today, my counterpart and I are going to be presenting the Cooleypot bubble oxygenator. I am going to give a little less historical data on this and kind of give a little bit of a background onto why we chose to do this project. As Kathy mentioned, I am Jessica Crane. Many of you in this room are familiar with me. Some of you are not, but I am the daughter of one of the, in my personal opinion, legendary perfusionists who have graduated from THI, Terry Crane, who's up here on the front row, who will be stepping up next. So many of us in this room, I look around, were trained by him. Some of you have not been trained by him, but nonetheless, you will benefit from the legacy that he's left for us here. Now, some of you probably went to school when Terry was here and had an office. I was one of those people. There was a very, very tiny, narrow path leading from the door to his desk. There was also another path to a chair in which you could have conversations with him. Anybody have that situation in this room? Anybody? Okay, a few of us. So you can appreciate this slide. Forgive me. So he was always surrounded by many boxes, which probably included many of the articles that Mark just spoke about. They were filled with many journals and articles that discussed the history of perfusion. And if you were a student and you were doing a research project, have no doubt, if you walked in and asked for something, he would tell you, oh yeah, it's 3 rows back and maybe 3 or 4 boxes down. And you would always find that random article that fit perfectly with whatever you were trying to present. Oftentimes, many of those articles coming from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and in my situation, the 90s. Now, you kind of wonder why, all right, I'm talking about Terry's office. Well, in January of 2020, he retired, and all of these lovely boxes came home. Much to the dismay of this beautiful woman sitting up front, who is my mother. This is Marilyn. Everybody say hi, because she kept him going all those years. She's amazing. So, but this history came back into my life about 2.5 years ago when my team was interviewing a candidate. And she is amazing. I knew within the first 5 minutes of meeting this candidate that she was a unicorn. She was a real life unicorn in my presence. And I knew without a shadow of a doubt, I wanted to work with her. So I enticed her and gave her a pair of scrubs and told her that she was going to be returning to work for me one day. So to the betterment, or to my betterment, she accepted the position with us. After she arrived, we began chatting. She wasn't a THI grad. She talks about Texas being an island where we care so much about the history of perfusion. And that's kind of when I divulged to her that Terry's my father. So She then shares with me that she got this random piece of perfusion equipment with her first position that she held, and she wanted to make a flower pot out of it. And so we got to talking, and she asked if I could reach out to him and have her help him. So I asked her a little bit more about the device, and come to find out, she worked with a gentleman that was on the job trained back in the 60s, like Mark talked about. And he was at the Detroit Medical Center. And one day he went to the loading dock and was going through this closet next to the loading dock and just found this random piece of equipment. So when she joined him, he actually passed that piece of equipment down, but she'd done all this research and was trying to figure out what it was. So reached out to Terry, asked if he could help her, of course. And we all know Terry. He jumped right in and said yes. So it helped because we were able to kind of connect those dots where she has this random piece of equipment. He has this love of the history of perfusion. It's a perfect setting for us. My parents live about 5 hours away from me, so it's kind of hard to just, hey, come on over, Dad. So the next trip up, we were going to plan to have her go ahead and bring this mysterious piece of equipment over to the house. But we just kind of decided to fast track that. Terry was cleaning out many boxes and came across a bunch of brochures from equipment items from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and said, hey, why don't you go ahead and give Sarah a call? Let's just have her snap a photo. So I did. I asked her to. And upon seeing this photo, I immediately used some explicits. Some of you who know me know that that might not be so surprising. And I informed her that she had actually, in fact, found possibly a Cooley Coffeepot oxygenator. So can I show the wheel? Not sure if everybody can see that, but we'll leave it up here for everybody to come by and look at later. So I immediately told Sarah I needed to get off the phone. And I told my dad that he could go ahead and put those brochures away. He wasn't going to need them because I think I knew what we had. My mom can attest to this. There are only a few moments in my father's professional history that I have heard this type of excitement come out of his voice. The first one that I can remember in my adult life was when Dr. Cooley and Dr. DeBakey set aside their feud and started speaking again. He was elated by that. The next time was when he opened up the photo that I had sent him. Thanks to Miss Sarah Lombardi. When my parents eventually made it to the house to come visit after this magical discovery that we figured out, I brought the actual physical oxygenator for him to see. Sarah had tried many times to get it apart and disassemble it with no success. I'm sitting there in my driveway taking photos of him, and he had it dismantled within a matter, maybe 1 to 2 minutes? And my son and I sat there listening to the story about how it worked, and even my son got involved in looking at the parts and just exploring, which was pretty awesome to have that family moment. Steve, where are you? Mr. Sutton. Okay, this is for you, son. The answer is no. You cannot have it when he dies. It's mine. But for right now, Sarah has very graciously offered this amazing discovery as a gift to my father. I am quite confident he is going to take care of it with the same love and devotion that he's taken care of me my entire life. The way he probably treated many of the students that have gone through this program. So, without further ado, we can go to the more technical part of this presentation. I present to you my favorite phone a friend, my mentor, my personal hero, my daddy, Mr. Terry Crane.
Let's see. How do I make these slides go?
This way and this way. So
Okay.
forward, this way.
Okay. You can tell I have a lot of experience in this. I always required the students to know how to do these kinds of things. And again, I'm not computer literate, so bear with me if I go through this thing. Given the time frame, I will try to be very brief. I have about 60 to 100 slides. We're not going to stop and talk about all of them, so we'll get through this. Oh, that's actually a nice picture, but it was much worse than that. That was when it was cleaned up. Again, Jessica Crane, Sarah, and myself worked on this project for some period of time for the last few months. Oops, going the wrong direction. Sorry about that. Most of us, as you're well aware, would not be here today without the support of Dr. Cooley, not only his clinical training, but in our academic program here at the Texas Heart Institute. One of the biggest things that I ever learned from him, and many of you have also, is the fact of his motto: modify, simplify, and apply. And that goes very true with this bubble oxygenator, the Cooley Coffeepot oxygenator, because he wanted one totally reusable item and not disposable. And that worked out well for the first 100 or so cases, but then he realized it was important to go to disposable type devices. This particular oxygenator, you'll notice it has 2 finger pumps there, Sigma motor pumps. You can see the sample of this upstairs just above you in the museum above you. There's also a sample of the pump or the oxygenator at the DeBakey Museum, but they're using a roller pump of that particular unit right there. And so it's a quite remarkable piece of equipment, very simplistic. Like he said, modify, simplify, and apply. So the oxygenator, this is probably going to be one of the better pictures here for you to fully understand the concept and principle. But basically what you do is you take these Sigma motor pumps and you pump venous blood into the bottom of it. It has an oxygen disperser plate at the very base. You pump oxygen into it. It bubbles up through the center of the core right there, just like a fish tank. Then the oxygenation takes place. Of course, the blood is frothy, foamy, and at the very top of the stainless steel canister, there's a canister with a stainless steel sponge. It's coated with an anti-foam A treatment, and that defoams the blood for the most part. But in order to remove some additional micro bubbles that allow the blood to then travel down a helix. By traveling down the helix, it allows the bubbles to rise to the top. And then over towards the right side of that is a glass tube. Now, the one I have upstairs, we did place a glass tube in it, so you can see the operating level during bypass. And this is noteworthy because the unit I just rebuilt right here does not have a glass tube. You cannot see the operating level. Therefore, you could pump air with it. And then the arterial blood was pumped out of the arterial reservoir to the patient through another finger pump. The finger pumps work very, very well as far as blood flows, but the roller pumps provided much better basis for perfusion. Back in the earlier days, Mary Martin was the perfusionist for Dr. DeBakey and Dr. Cooley both. When Dr. Cooley and Dr. DeBakey split their practices, Mary stayed with Dr. DeBakey. Dr. Cooley over that weekend, I think, trained a couple of the nurses how to set up and run the heart-lung machines, and he was doing cases on Monday morning. So that was pretty quick. Again, if you get an opportunity, please take the time to go upstairs to our museum. These are some of the things I've gotten out of my garage, and I'm sure my wife appreciated that. But basically, Cooley oxygenator on the far left, the Rig Gibbs guard or the TMP venotherms up there at the top left is a bubble oxygenator. The bag oxygenators that we use with the Travenol 2LF and the 6LF, they're on the right-hand side. Those are 2 bags hanging there. The 2LF was for pediatrics. It goes up to 2 liters per minute, and the larger one was the 6LF. The heat exchanger was that plastic one on the bottom left, which is a blue and white one. We also had the stainless steel ones in the very back, but the blue and the white was, water on one side, blood on the other. The finger pumps down there, I rebuilt it, so it works out great. You'd be amazed how fast it works. We also use the DeWalt Lily High Oxygenator over to the far right, the coil unit right there. So anyway, I got this thing home that Jessica had. Went through all my books to find all the history I could on it because I was not familiar with this external helix concept. And so I looked further into it and trying to find articles and research on it, and it dug pretty deep. And so first thing I did is I went to the hardware store and bought some PVC tubing to represent the helical coil. But again, this was not Dr. Cooley's final version because he wanted something you could reuse over and over again. And they could do 2 to 4 cases per day because I think at that particular time they had like 2 units at that particular time. All in total, I think they made about 5 of these devices for open heart surgery. And they're, again, upstairs over at the DeBakey Museum, this one, and I'm not sure where the other one is. Anyway. In the top part of the picture also, I took all of my old stainless steel connectors and cannulas, and there's a flat disc in there and a convoluted disc up there. And that's actually a piece of tubing curved at the very top up there. It's from Dr. DeBakey's pump. It's a flange unit right there. So anyway, took a lot of measurements on this device. That's the oxygen disperser plate. I'll talk to you a little bit more about that in a moment. And then I took that out, took out the O-ring that supported it, took some more measurement, took a lot of measurements because I wanted to make sure that I fully understood and comprehended the form, fit, and function of the device. And it was quite remarkable. And again, upon reading additional information, I knew that the holes either had to be drilled or punctured. Well, basically, this device was actually designed, developed, and manufactured with private funds from Dr. Leachman, Dr. Latson, Dr. Cooley, and others at that particular time. So again, it goes back to cardiology. The cardiologists really wanted this thing to work. So they put a lot of time and effort into it. And of course, Dr. Cooley definitely wanted to support it also. But I think I read somewhere that he wasn't that interested in the research lab per se. He was allergic to dogs, I think is what they said. Anyway, took some more measurements there. I had some needles there at the house, and come to find out, they measured about 20 thousandths of an inch, which is about a 25 gauge needle. Upon further reading about this, that's really what they did. They just took a 25 or 28 gauge needle and punctured holes in it. I think it was a total of 150 holes. They tried pumice stones from various industrial supply places. About 100 different sizes. None of them oxygenated the blood adequately. And then they found that this gave them adequate O2, CO2 transfer. Anyway, that's the oxygen chamber right there. Unit, go back just a touch. The tube over there to the far left, gray looking, anything that was blood contact surface, I was another amazed at the fact that that was like a Teflon coating. So anything that was blood contact had a coating on it. So that was pretty remarkable in itself also. The unit was so tall, and it had a tendency to fall over. So I had this platform I built back in the mid 70s. We were the first, Texas Heart Institute was the first to use the Biomedicus centrifugal pump on a 10-year-old Jehovah's Witness patient, and proved to be very satisfactory. So I had that plate built to roll around our bio pump in the operating rooms back in the early days. So we got it locked down. This is the arterial reservoir chamber or outflow area. It's actually an inflow. The large opening on the far right, that's the arterial inlet. It swirls around on the inside, creates a vortex very similar to an arterial filter. What I was not sure of and was surprised to see was there was a screen in there. The small port on the far left is the arterial outlet. The other ports that you see below there, those are for venous inlets and the locking nut. So here's a little bit better view in the far left arterial outlet. The other 2 ports were for venous inlets because they really didn't use suctions at that particular time. And took some more measurements, found out that they were measuring about 375 thousandths inch on the internal diameters, which for those of you who are not familiar with it, that's 3/8 of an inch. The O-ring, took out the seating O-ring that was located above the arterial filter. And I thought, well, this is interesting, and took a look at the filter and took some more measurements. And I was just fascinated by the size of this filter and how in the world would this possibly work? So I took some more measurements, just eyeballing the best I could, about 10,000ths of an inch or so. And then I looked at it a little bit closer underneath the magnifying lens and thought, oh my gosh, there's a whole bunch of larger holes here. And I thought, what is that? Then it dawned on me. They had punctured larger holes in the arterial filter screen to give adequacy for flow rate going through it, because obviously they were becoming occluded, blocked off, given the size and the nature, and also the surface area right there. I also recognized too that the filter had the tendency to fall down into the arterial reservoir. So I had a flange there at the house, and I just put one of my flanges in the base to hold the filter up, to prevent it from falling down. Screwed the arterial section into the gas chamber. Then I took the oxygenating chambers and the arterial chambers, both took some more measurements on them, attached them back together, re-siliconized them. That was another thing they would do. They would siliconize these parts, the internal parts, about every 2 or 3 or 4 cases, or whatever the case may be. The upper chamber was actually a defoaming chamber. The defoaming chamber is, again, where the froth and blood all comes in contact with it. And you can see with that gray bluish looking that was the coated surfaces. Again, you'll see the inner core tube right there that has the baffles, if you will, to direct the froth and foam all around the defoaming area. And again, took some more measurements. That's the lid that went on top of the reservoir. And again, it's easily removable, because back in the earlier days, it has a tendency to excessive froth and foam, and you'd have a can of a silicone spray, and you would just kind of spray it into the chamber to reduce the froth and foam from occurring. Then, of course, there was a large opening at the top to allow the excess gases, the O2 and the CO2, to escape. And again, another top view, because it's blood contact area, it was all coated. And then I put all that together. And it just so happens, as you might imagine, I had one of the original stainless steel sponges from the day. And really, these are stainless steel sponges used for cleaning equipment. And then they would siliconize these with the Dow Corning Silicone A to break up the surface tension of the bubbles, and et cetera. Then place that inside there. I didn't have, but this is the only one I had. So under normal conditions, you'd have several of these placed in there and siliconized to help defoaming, because you can imagine bubbling, frothing foam with oxygenator is pretty difficult to deal with. Okay, so I finally got done with it, and then decided, well, I got the tube from the hardware store. It's not Tygon. Tygon, by the way, is a trade name. It means tough as a tiger, strong as a lion. It's from the Norton Corporation years ago. I used to work with them too. And anyway, it works out very well. Clamp it in. You could use hose clamps at that time period. They did have hose clamps, but they also used wire and twisted wire to hold the connections together to prevent them from coming off and slipping off. And again, this is a very crude item. This particular unit was used in the research labs only, was not used clinically. The animals that were done in the research lab, Dr. Leachman, Dr. Latson, and then would take the dogs home to recover the dogs at home, by the way. Tidbits of knowledge, pearls of wisdom. Also, they would use tape to stick over any kind of wire twist or the areas like that to prevent getting cut and scratched, et cetera. Just to give it a little bit of diversity too, I added latex tubing there to the venous inflow tubes, the tube there, because they would cannulate the superior and inferior vena cava using the finger pumps and pump the blood down. Occasionally, they would use the suctions. The white over towards the far left is the silicone type tubing. I wasn't sure if they were using any of these at that particular time. They did have access to PVC tubing, polyvinyl chloride tubing, and I did use some green tubing there. I used one of my old stainless steel connectors also to represent the gas inflow side. So I tried to make it a little bit representative, but I really doubt that they had green tubing and all the other things I was talking about. The helix, I'm sorry, I did not have time to buy a helical coil support mechanism like they have upstairs. So I just used some umbilical tape and some paper clips to kind of hold the helix in place. And then up at the very top, you can see some of the arterial cannulas, the venous cannulas. They're metal. Those the ones that we used to use many, many years ago, and they tossed them out. So I'm a scavenger, so I got them out of the trash and kept them. And so that certainly helps also to have old parts around them. And then I had some other plastic parts. I know that many of you people think, oh my God, perfusion technology is so difficult, it's so complex, and I get so tied up in the things that behind the heart lung machine. But you got to give us, those of us that worked back in the early days, a little bit of credit for our knowledge and our expertise. So please bear with us. Out of all of those books, I found a handful of textbooks that had references to the Cooley Coffeepot Oxygenator, exploratory circulation heart lung bypass, the Oxygenator, and of course our 25 years of excellence here at the Texas Heart Institute. They were all very beneficial. And then I had some references from various articles from journals from Dr. Cooley and others that had published about that particular device. I would like to give special thanks to Sonia and to Rebecca. Sonia and Rebecca both used to work here at the Texas Heart Institute many years ago, and they helped me find, they knew that I was not computer literate, and they knew that they could find, and they was always very, very helpful to help me find articles and things of that nature. And Sonia is now working here at the Texas Medical Center Library Systems, and Rebecca's working at University of Texas there in San Antonio. And again, thank you for coming to the Texas Heart Institute. I hope you enjoy your stay, your educational opportunities, and I'm sorry I went over. Take care. Bye.